Imagine this: four young Nigerian men, barely out of their teens, hijack a plane. Not for money or fame, but to demand democracy. So this wasn't just a hijack, it was a statement, a bold, terrifying, high-stakes protest that would make history. October 25th, 1993. These four young men, Richard Ogunderu, Kabi Adenuga, Benneth Uluwadayasi, and Kenny Rasak Lawal, all between 19 and early 20s, board a Nigerian Airways flight from Lagos to Abuja, not for a vacation or a business trip. These guys were on a mission that would shake the country. But what could drive these young men to such extremes? Now, 4 months earlier, Nigeria was under military rule. General Ibrahim Babangida had just annulled the June 12th presidential election, an election that many believed was freely and fairly won by MKO Abiola. The people had spoken through the ballots, but the generals refused to listen. Many Nigerians felt robbed, and civil unrest and political tensions were high. And so the movement of the advancement of democracy, MAD, led by Jerry Yusuf, was silently growing. When the four men heard about MAD's plan to send a bold message to the world, they joined. These four men were tired of watching the country rot in silence. So they decided to take their fight 30,000 feet into the sky, with no training, no backup, just conviction and courage. Their plan was daring: hijack a plane, fly to Frankfurt, Germany, hold a press conference and demand the return of democracy to Nigeria. And so, on that October morning, they boarded Nigerian Airways Flight 470 with 11 crew members and over 130 passengers, including government officials and even the Vice President of China. The flight took off as usual. Destination: Abuja. But mid-flight, chaos erupted. The four men stood up, revealed their intention, and took control. Armed with petrol, lighters, jackknives, and what they later admitted were fake guns, they handed out printed flyers listing their demands: resignation of military government, the return of embezzled public funds, and the reopening of closed newspapers and universities. Panic filled the cabin. The pilots were ordered to reroute the plane to Frankfurt. But there was a problem. Remember, this was a short domestic flight, so the plane didn't have enough fuel for Europe. Midway through the skies of Africa, they were forced to land in Niger to refuel. And that's where their plan fell apart. The Nigerian military wasn't about to let that plane take off again. And then a tense 3-day standoff began. The hijackers threatened to set the plane on fire within 72 hours if their demands weren't met. Eventually, the hijackers released 129 hostages, including the Vice President of China, keeping behind the crew members and Nigerian officials. But when the army finally stormed the plane, chaos erupted, and a crew member was sadly unalived. Some others were injured, and the hijackers were arrested. They were tried in Niger and sentenced to 9 years in prison. But behind bars, life changed for them. Richard found faith in Christianity and he began preaching and teaching inmates to read. Kabir survived by working for food. The other two, Benneth and Kenny, slipped quietly into obscurity. After 9 long years, they were released. Richard has publicly talked about the experience. He says he's proud of standing up for democracy. However, he admitted the method was extreme. When asked if he regretted the hijack, his answer was that the only regret would have been dying before seeing the democracy they fought for. Today, Richard leads the African Youth Organization, teaching young people about democracy and civic engagement. He says he's content with his life. Kabi admits the act still haunts him sometimes, but he believes it was driven by moral urgency. Little is known today about Benneth and Kenny. Their lives remain private. Over 3 decades later, their story inspired the Netflix movie Hijack 93, which was released in October of 2024. Now, for some, this story is a cautionary tale. For others, it's a symbol of courage. Because on that October morning in 1993, 4 young Nigerians risked it all, not for profit, not for power, but for the right to vote and be heard. At 30,000 feet above the ground, they tried to make the world listen. And whether they were heroes or misguided idealists, their story still echoes as a haunting question in Nigeria's history. How far would you go for your country's freedom? When is protest justified? And what is the cost?